Stylization is an issue that actually stems not from the aesthetic of 2D anime itself, per se, but more from the manga that so much of it is based upon. Manga, despite telling similar stories to anime, is an entirely different medium that has different technical focuses and limitations. The biggest one, obviously, is that manga is a static medium. Nothing in it moves. For mangaka, when designing their characters, their main concern is making the characters look cool. What they aren't concerned about is how that character would move when animated, since it's not a problem they'll personally ever have to deal with. This, combined with manga's unique stylization, leads to designs that, while look really interesting, can become a nightmare when trying to be adapted into a medium with motion, because these shapes are actually unable to exist in the real world. I already talked about this a bit earlier with the JoJo's opening, and how perspective is distorted to create poses that look cool, but are impossible using real-world perspective. But allow me to entertain a bit more mundane of an example that pops up in almost every anime you've ever watched. Hairstyles. Anime is infamous for its insane hairstyles. Talk to a normie about anime and what do they say? Oh, those Japanese cartoons with the big eyes and weird hair. It's a staple of the aesthetic. The problem with anime, and the manga they're based on, is that the stylized hair is quite often drawn ignoring actual dimension. Hair in manga tends to focus on maintaining its silhouette, not its implied three-dimensional shape. You can find dozens of examples of characters drawn in manga where no matter what angle they're drawn at, their hair still retains the same silhouette, even when it shouldn't. So this is a problem that both 2D anime and 3D anime inherit when adapting manga, since they both introduce motion and need to rectify the shape-silhouette dilemma in some fashion. Unfortunately for 3D, traditional anime is much better suited as a medium to handle this issue. Going back to our previous point where we were talking about perspective for a second sets us up here perfectly. While 2D animators have to painstakingly replicate the behavior of 3D space to imply dimension to their work, they also have the freedom to purposely animate this aspect incorrectly in the name of stylization. And it's exactly the same thing here. The focus on rendering characters' hairstyles in 2D anime tends to mimic manga as much as possible, prioritizing maintaining silhouette over animating the shape in a realistic fashion. Silhouette will similarly be maintained from every perspective when the character is staying still, and if a shot forces a character to move in a more dynamic way that would betray the shape, the hair animation is often fudged to keep the silhouette as uninterrupted as possible. A great example of this stylization of hair in a traditional anime you've all probably seen is Dragon Ball Z and the character of Goku. As far as anime hair goes, in the grand scheme of things, Goku's hair is pretty tame, at least when he is in Super Saiyan 3. But the default normal state of Goku's hair is animated in a way that completely ignores how the implied shape of his hair would move in the real world. I can really sum it up with just 2 frames. Here's Goku's hairstyle from the front, and here it is in profile view. It's the exact same silhouette. This makes sense because the hair as Toriyama initially designed it would look bizarre if it was drawn prioritizing the shape from the side view, as it would just be this odd sort of black thing jutting out from the center of his head. So both 2D mediums elect to ignore the correct way to draw this shape and instead preserve the silhouette in the name of aesthetic. But when tackling this problem in 3D, it becomes much more complicated, because this plays into the same double-edged sword we talked about with perspective. 3D inherently handles dimension, but it does so perfectly. In other words, everything made in 3D automatically prioritizes dimension over silhouette, because it's not faking that dimension, it's baked into the medium itself, including these hairstyles that have to basically be bullshitted in every other medium to make sure they look right. We can see this problem perfectly if we go back to the Goku example. This was a glaring problem in early 3D video game adaptations of Dragon Ball, such as the original Budokai over here in the US. Goku looked fine when viewed straight on in his intro cinematic, but fighting games are traditionally viewed from a profile view, the least flattering angle for Goku's hairstyle, and we can tell that, yeah, it looks pretty bad here. So when adapting a shape like this into a 3D anime production, animators are left with a choice. Do they model the shape from the most commonly viewed perspective of the object and try to minimize the time it's viewed from an unflattering angle? Or do they put in the extra time and effort to try and actively compensate to make the shape pleasing when viewed from any direction? It's a difficult problem to grapple with, and since anime series tend to have a very tight schedule, oftentimes it's left alone, and odd shapes not making the transition to 3D just right is another example of 3D anime looking kinda wonky. So we made it to the halfway point of the Why 3D Anime Fails series. Thanks everybody for sticking around all this time. I just want to give a special shout out to Captain Suppy, who actually stepped up to the plate to edit this video. If it wasn't for him, we probably would still be waiting on this for another 3 or 4 months. because I am just fucking awful when it comes to editing video. I take forever, and I'm drowning in other projects right now. If you want to see those other projects, click the links below to go to my Instagram, where I've been posting a bunch of low-poly 3D of my own, which is kind of what inspired this whole series in the first place, and getting into 3D art myself, and kind of reverse engineering how it's done in other mediums, especially anime. And if you want to check out Captain Suppy's work, he does a bunch of like anime AMVs and stuff, so I'll link to his channel as well. I want to give a shout out to all these names scrolling on the screen. These are all my patrons that make videos like this possible and help me pay the bills just a little bit better than I would otherwise. So shout out to everybody here. If you see them in the comments, be sure to give them some love. And yeah, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos breaking down anime, 3D in general, as well as some animations I'll be posting here as I get them completed. So thank you so much for watching, and the next one, part 4, should hopefully be out sooner rather than later now that I have someone helping me to do the editing. But until next time, I'm Tom Oliver, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.